Less stress, more time, more money. Welcome to the Cash Flow Contractor. Interview.
Martin, do jeans count as business attire?
Well, I think that depends on your mother and father, what jeans you have.
Okay.
If you get the right jeans, I'm
blue
sure
jeans,
that helps.
blue jeans.
Well, I would say yes, but I
Yes.
might find out otherwise.
Okay.
I think everything has an appropriate place, and the world has changed, and I'm thankful that I can wear jeans, but I do wear a blue blazer on top of it. I have to tell you a quick story.
Okay.
I was in Texas over the weekend speaking at a company retreat for a veterinary supply company. So there were probably 60, 70 people there.
Who wants to retreat and talk to you or listen to you talk?
There you go. The boss made them. Is that etiquette? Is that good etiquette, that kind of smart aleck? Well, anyway, so I walk in there and I've got on a white button-down cotton shirt and a blue blazer, and I'm looking at a sea of cowboy hats.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. So I told him I'd been watching a YouTube video about how to be a better speaker, and that the guy had said, if the audience has more than 50% ball caps and cowboy hats, you put on a white cotton shirt and a blue blazer and you'll fit right in. Now, that was like knowing your audience. Of course, if I'd have gone in there wearing a cowboy hat, that would have been they'd have seen right through that.
Well,
But blue jeans.
it can't be any worse than showing up in athletic shorts and a company t-shirt
Right.
and a black hat
Nobody would ever do that.
on the day that you're recording a business etiquette podcast.
Yeah, but nobody would ever. Oh, wait. You did do that.
I did that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's me.
Okay.
Hey, I want to welcome Hilarie onto our podcast. Hilarie, it's great to have you on. Thanks for being here. Martin, how did you find Hilarie?
Through Eric Daffern, who was a guest on our podcast early on.
I believe that's
an
episode
attorney.
6, if everyone wants to check that out.
Episode 6?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And anyway, we were talking about undiscussed subjects, and one of them was etiquette. And when he brought that up, I thought, ooh, we have to have Hilarie on. So
Yeah.
I've given away what this is about, right?
No, yeah, they clicked on the title that was probably had something around etiquette in it, so they're listening for sure. Hilarie, tell us a little about where you're from.
Well, I grew up in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
I've been a banker for 43 years, and probably 15, 18 years ago, I noticed that there was not much etiquette anymore in business, and decided that I would go to school and learn how to do this.
Where'd you go to school for that?
I went to Washington, D.C., to the Protocol School of Washington.
Oh, goodness, and how long did that take?
It was about a 10-day program.
Okay.
I first graduated with corporate etiquette and international protocol. And what was really great about that class is I had classmates from all over the world. So the Crown Prince, the head of the Crown Prince's detail was in my class.
Yeah.
I had a Canadian Mountie. I had people from all over
Really?
the world in the international protocol class. And I enjoyed that so much, I went back and then got a U.S. protocol certification. So most of the people that have that work for the military, for an Air Force base or something.
Gotcha.
I'm really the only
Business
kind
person.
of private
Yeah.
consultant in the state that I know of. So
Wow, that's so fascinating. The only times that I've ever heard of business etiquette, it was really college, and it could have been you, maybe you come and spoke, I don't know, but we had a speaker
might
come,
have.
and it was good, but it was only an hour, and you're in a college class that no one's really paying attention. But the only thing, and then I also took another course. There's a book that we read in the course that was around business etiquette, and it was these letters to a lady about how to handle business situations. And it was interesting, but it never really stuck that well. The only thing that really stuck with me is that 1 hour course that we had. We were talking about interviews because we were in college, we're looking to maybe do internship interviews or whatever it is. And they talked about if they take you to a bar and they hand you a beer, that you take the beer, but you don't drink it. And you try to follow everybody else's, like is the interviewer drinking? Are you of age? Like all these different things. And I just thought it was the most like elephant in the room situation, like of awkwardness of why are we in this position? Just do a regular interview. But anyways, that's my business etiquette story.
So you haven't had a beer? You haven't drank?
I'm worried that people are worried about my etiquette. I still haven't had a beer to this day. I just take it and pop the top and I just walk around. No, it's just, it was an interesting moment in college. But so you teach courses as well?
Yes.
At OU, or where do you usually do them?
I have taught at OU several times.
So it was probably you. Maybe. Is this the advice that you give?
Would you tell somebody not to drink a beer?
Well, I would tell you that happened to me my very first lending job. Well, really, I was going into a training program. I just graduated from college, and I was at a huge bank downtown, and the HR director of the bank took me to lunch my first day, and someone sent over 2 glasses of wine.
Oh.
And she looked at me and said, "Do not touch that," which I wouldn't have anyway, but I was 23 and I didn't know, and I didn't know if she was testing me or if someone else was. We don't know why they came to the table, but so I definitely learned
Wow.
that.
That's so
I
interesting.
never thought about any of that.
You have a etiquette story, kind of reverse though, where you went to West Texas, was it? And the guys that you were meeting with, you were trying to sell them something, and they were drinking beer, and you don't drink. What was that?
Well,
story?
I don't know if that's etiquette. That's
I think it's etiquette.
Close to getting killed. And 2 companies ago, we built big rock grinding machines, 700 horsepower, and we were in a mine in West Texas with our dealer, and our dealer in the area, I was there as the factory guy, and our dealer, he was a great big old Texas boy with big hands and kind of loud, and I really liked him, and the miners, the guys from the mines were all big old boys, and so after we did our demonstration, we went back to the hotel, and they were all sitting around drinking, and I don't want to disappoint our audience, but I don't drink, and I didn't drink at that time either. So I'm sitting at the table with these guys, and they all order drinks, and I said, nothing for me, and they looked at me, I said, hang on just a second. I went up to the bar and I said, "You guys have iced tea?" I said, "No, we don't have any iced tea." And I said, "Well, give me club soda in a glass and just put a little shot of Coke in there so it discolored it." And I said, "Every time I order a whiskey, whatever
Whiskey,
it was,
Coke, or whatever.
yeah, bring me that." And so that's what they did. Well, nobody was the wiser. They're getting louder and all this, and I'm sitting over there, and I promise you, if they'd have known I was doing that, they would have killed me. But I got another one.
Let's talk about that real quick.
Okay.
Is that etiquette, you think, or no? Because I think what it is just paying respect to the people that you're with and the audience, essentially, as we were talking about your jeans earlier. Just like knowing your audience and, being respectful and not making them feel weird about being around you. Obviously, they probably put them in a bad etiquette situation where they're drinking a bunch at a business meeting. So.
Etiquette wasn't on these guys' mind, but protocol was.
Protocol.
The way they run their lives, and I was going, ooh.
Well, your first goal in etiquette is to know what the rules are so that you can be comfortable in a situation, but you also want others to be comfortable with you. I think what you did was perfect because you weren't drawing attention to yourself or being distracting from the other people by not doing what they do. So you just found a way to fit in, but still stay with what your values are.
Well, my concern with it was that when a bunch of guys are drinking and talking and dealing, trying to buy a machine and stuff, and you're over there not drinking, my concern was that, and why I say it would have killed me is they find out that I was kind of lying to them because I didn't tell them what I obviously didn't tell them. But anyway, made it through the night.
Man.
Go ahead.
No, I think that's important to recognize with etiquette, that what you mentioned is he held to his values, but he also respected them in a way. It was a little bit of lying, Martin.
It was kind of lying.
Tis.
It was
But-
deceitful. I didn't tell him.
But at the same time, you did it with a good intention, I think,
Right.
of like just wanting to fit in and be a part of the group and not make someone feel uncomfortable. So I guess that goes to a good question. What is etiquette? Why does etiquette matter?
Well, it's really a set of rules or guidelines for living. And when you think about, sometimes when you hear the word, you think, oh, it's about table manners and all that. Really goes beyond that. When you think, do you all play golf?
Yeah.
What do you want to play golf with someone that doesn't know the rules, that just went out and bought a set of golf clubs? And so it's,
Yeah.
think about it that way. Or driving a car, we have a set of rules. You turn on your blinker, you let people know what your intentions are.
Right.
So it's really kind of everywhere in
Yeah.
in all of our lives, and whether it's holding the elevator door open for someone, going through a door and making sure if someone's behind you that you've held the door for them,
Yeah.
to table manners, how about a dog? If you've got a dog and the dog's on a leash, we know that there are rules with that. So
Yeah.
it's really just rules for living.
And I think I think etiquette changes by culture, right?
Oh, yes.
And I think that's part of the difficulty. I mean, even I know so many friends that would never want to play golf because they're scared of the etiquette, because they don't, it seems like there's these imaginary rules that they're going to step over the bounds, and they're going to look like an idiot because they don't know the rules. And I think in some ways, etiquette can feel like a barrier, even to probably some listeners, where they don't want to go and meet with the banker because they feel like they're going to, do something wrong or not look the part.
Well, and what is so simple about this is there aren't that many rules. I probably know all of them, but you could do 10 maybe that no one would ever know that you didn't know what I know.
Yeah.
Just some basic things, but the whole goal is to know what they are and know when to use them. And it's
Yeah.
not about being perfect. It's about not distracting people, being comfortable, making other people comfortable, and it really all comes down to trust also. So when you think about the handshake and the knife blade, and those things all have to do, or how about when you toast at a wedding, or those things all have to do with trust. And that's why this fits so well with my job
Yeah.
as an addition to my job, because that's what I want my customers to feel, is that they can trust me with my advice. And the bank also wants to trust me to send me out to a client that I know how to behave.
Yeah.
And you never really know what that client knows. Everyone knows I'm a banker. Not everyone knows I know this. And so I'm constantly judging people.
Yeah.
They have no idea that this is what I do in my spare time.
What might you say to people who think that etiquette is old-fashioned and it doesn't apply anymore?
It's dead. Yeah.
I mean, I don't think I've ever had anybody really exactly say that to me, but I open the door for anybody when we meet at a door. I just do it. I'm never going to change the way I was raised. But people have actually said, well, I don't need you to,
Open
not
my
to me,
door.
but yeah, to open my door. You think I'm weak because no, I'm just trying to be polite. But I think there are people who think that etiquette is old-fashioned and it doesn't apply anymore. What would you say to that?
Well, I think that's probably not true, because we've been doing some of the things, handshaking and table manners, for thousands of years.
Right.
And some of these rules date back to ancient Egypt, Rome, France, where King Louis the 14th is the one that really created the word etiquette.
Oh, really?
We have George Washington's book of Rules and Civility and Decent Behavior that he wrote when he was 14 years old.
Oh, really?
So
I had no idea.
it's a wonderful book, and although the wording in it isn't how we would say it now, because that would be old-fashioned. It still says some of the same things. So most of the things that we do have not changed ever. When etiquette rules started changing was when we brought on technology
I was about
and
to say
social
that.
media. And nothing really ever changed until then. And now that we have had the pandemic,
Yeah.
we now have a third wave of new etiquette rules.
Yeah, Zoom etiquette's like a real thing.
Oh.
And I probably even messed that up myself, but I think I know some basic things. Is there a book on Zoom etiquette?
New books are coming out all the time.
Really?
And what I think one of my biggest pet peeves about it was people that didn't really pay attention to their background and the lighting.
Yeah.
And they would be on NBC News in the morning and as an expert in something, and they're in their kitchen and I'm looking at their plates and dishes behind them and the lighting's bad, and so I think people really weren't thinking about that. And my very favorite is the Folgers coffee commercials.
Okay.
Where the man doesn't realize
I've
that
seen
he
that.
has his
Leans forward,
screen
he's wearing
pointed
shorts.
down. And so I think people weren't really thinking about that they needed to dress in a Zoom video meeting exactly like they would at work.
Yeah.
And I've been in board meetings on Zoom where the staff is working from home, not wearing makeup, have a yoga bun, and I've got my work clothes on and I'm working from home at that time. So I think there were a lot of maybe faux pas in some of that. Also, I think people didn't know where the mute button was, and everyone had to yell, "You're on mute." And so we just weren't used to all that. I'd never worked from home.
Yeah.
So it created a lot of inconveniences for people. And dogs are barking in the backyard, kids are photobombing, and so it was really hard. But we also had to be really creative. So
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the things about Zoom that has changed a lot of things is just how people interact with each other. I know for myself, one thing that I hate about Zoom calls is when someone talks the entire time. It's just not how it would happen in this situation. There would be a balance. I also hate how much interruption there is with bad connections and like people cutting each other off but not meeting to, and I think that throws things off. I think there's a Zoom etiquette around, I have done this before, usually on an internal meeting, and I probably get away with it only because I'm the boss, but joining a Zoom meeting on the road while driving, and even if my video is off or the video is off, I just think a phone call, that's fine. I think people are in traffic and take phone calls all the time, but if it was a scheduled Zoom, it's okay to join from your phone, but you need to be seated at a desk of some sort or something like that. And I think that's an etiquette that just is, I don't know that anybody, I think that's the interesting about etiquette. No one's ever told me that, but it's just something that I feel convicted of
Where you've learned the rules somewhere along the way.
Somewhere those rules came. And I think that's how a lot of these rules came about to be, is not necessarily someone's like, all right, we're going to dress like this and we're going to say this whenever this happens and whatever. I think it's just how it naturally came about.
A lot of it is common sense.
Right.
Really,
And
where you get down to the rules is more table manners and where silverware goes, and maybe on the protocol side when you're introducing people. That's where really more the rules are. The rest of this is more manners.
Well, are manners a subset of etiquette? I mean, just for.
I think what's interesting is that we think of etiquette in formal terms, but I think there's etiquette in non-formal terms as well. Just even like smile whenever you see someone. That's not a formal thing, but if you're walking through the office and you never look at someone and smile, that's actually going to have a huge reflection of your values and your company culture. And I think that etiquette is almost a way of displaying the values that you have as a company and as a business person, but it also will shape the company culture that you have. if it's part of your etiquette that on Monday mornings you make sure you say hi to every single person in the office and ask how their weekend was, I think that's etiquette. But it's also, shows what your values are as a company. And so I think that's an interesting way to think of it for people. It's almost like in the church, there's certain things. I grew up Catholic. I'm not Catholic now, but there are so many rituals and practices that you do, and kneeling and standing and saying this line and whatever it is. And although they may seem ritualistic in a sense, there's actually a lot of meaning behind all of it. And they are there for a specific reason, and they actually help you to see a lot of a different perspective that you would have if you didn't do those rituals. And so I think if you take on that etiquette, it'll actually shape how you act in other ways in your company. And I'm going on a rant now, but
maybe rephrasing it just a little bit, but I envision, because I've actually seen it, but people say, I don't really care about all that. I am who I am, and you can take it or leave it, which is your right. What's the benefit of understanding etiquette? And we're kind of talking in a business setting here. We've got contractors. I'm always referring to a contractor driving around in a truck listening to this. Contractors, every kind of people. But what's the benefit of taking the time to learn, acknowledge, and practice good etiquette?
Well, you and I talked about this briefly, is we're all in sales.
Right.
No matter what you think, whether it's at work or at home. And I want that small amount of time I have with a client that I'd like to leave, say, Bank of America, to come to my bank, because we're all sort of a commodity.
Right.
I want to spend that time focused on getting that business, rather than what fork do I use, and am I distracting this person, or am I sorry.
No, you're fine.
Am I distracting this person, or I just want everything to be focused on that. And when you know what those rules are, you can spend your whole attention with that person. And people do business with people they enjoy being around, and they do business with people that they like, which I love this little red book of selling that's Jeffrey Gitomer that I've loved for years. And one of the first things that I say in my class is, raise your hand if you're in sales. And I might have 60 people and 3 people raise their hands, and they are lawyers and not work for nonprofits.
Don't think of themselves.
And they don't think about that they think sales is, I'm actually out asking people to buy something, and they don't realize that how do you decide to go to Bank First where I work, or Bank of America? It's because of probably the person that you're dealing with. And so if you're negotiating, if you're coordinating, if you're communicating, if you have to resolve conflict, if you have to convince someone of anything, that's all sales. And
which is everybody.
Yes. And so people really do business with people that they enjoy being around. And if you are just going to be yourself, which shouldn't really include
take it or leave it. That's
Yes.
who I am.
Yes, and you can still be who you are and have respect and manners when you're around other
And I
people.
think something you correct me if I'm wrong, but in my opinion, manners and good etiquette in a lot of ways are little sacrifices you make in deference to the other person.
Yes.
And even if I don't know etiquette and you use the right forks and you behave properly, I may not say, oh, Hillary checked off, she knows Rule 10. But I do notice something different, So subconsciously I would notice people who have good etiquette, good manners, even if not consciously, and that all loads in on the idea of being in sale. And it's not just to get the sale either, it's just because that's how I want to get along with the world, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to have to think about it, what fork do I use? Which bread is
Right.
mine? And I don't want to think about that. I want to have a more natural experience.
Yeah.
Well,
With,
I can imagine some people listening saying, well, I don't think about that, and I'm not worried. No, I'm just kidding. That's probably me. You have a great, on your website, HilarieBlaney.com, right? Which will be in the show notes.
Yep.
But you have some courses that you teach, and one of them I thought was just awesome, and it's titled Outclass the Competition, right? Isn't that
Yes.
that's the title? It's managing your image and minding your manners, right? Can you talk a little bit about what might go into a course like that? Outclass your competition. Boom. That should be the title of this episode, by the way.
well, it would really be two things. One, which I divide this class up in more of a networking, how you handle yourself at events. Believe it or not, there's business card etiquette. It's not just about handshaking and where your name tag goes and eye contact and body language and posture. Your posture
this
is your
is
first
so
line of
good.
communication.
Right.
And so in the pandemic, when we're not shaking hands, then what else can you do if you see someone? You, as you said, smile with your eyes. But you can do other things that, such as body language, that tells someone that you,
Well, that you trust yourself too. Yeah.
well, yes. And so I spend half of the class on first impressions. And so a first impression usually takes 7 seconds. And what you do,
Meaning
and
that's all you've got. If
in
you
that
pass that,
7
you
seconds.
blew it, right? Okay.
Yes. So what you do in that 7 seconds, and how you compose yourself, and where your name tag goes, and you walk in a room with good posture, which is your first line of communication. And
Ooh. First line of communication is
Yes.
good posture.
yes,
I like that.
and
Hang on.
how you shake hands, and a
Let's-
true handshake is a 3-second handshake.
Well, let's go into. I want to keep going on this path, but I want to get a little bit more details. So, let's talk about. But we'll go to the handshake first. What is handshake etiquette?
Well, the handshake is about respect and
Hey,
equality.
sorry to interrupt, but you mentioned the handshake and the knife earlier.
Uh-huh.
Can you tell a little history of the handshake and then how it's done?
Well, the handshake really was to demonstrate that neither person was holding a weapon.
Oh, okay.
And if you
Like
would
letting
pull
your guard
your
down.
hand out to shake someone's hand, it meant you didn't have a dagger up your sleeve.
Wow. Okay.
So,
Interesting. So that's how it originated. But then, what's the etiquette around it now today?
well, one thing I want to back up for 1 second
Okay,
and give you
sure.
just a little bit of history, but women did not shake hands for a long time
Okay.
until we started in business, probably in the 60s.
Seriously. Really?
And the real rule is a man should not put his hand out to shake a woman's hand until she does it first.
Is
So
that still
the
a rule
woman
today?
decides, yes.
Okay.
The woman decides.
Mm.
So don't put your hand out before the woman does. However, now that we are executive women working,
Right.
we should know better, because this is now more about being equal.
Man, I
Yeah.
totally choke on that. I stick my hand out to everybody.
Yeah.
I stuck my hand out to, I don't know, maybe we were at the same time.
Well, that's the whole goal.
That'd be a hard
is that
habit to
this is
break.
about equals,
Right.
and
Right.
when you do shake hands, that everyone's elbow comes out the same way. And in my classes, I talk about the different kinds of handshakes, and men are used to shaking hands the same way to each other, but when you shake a woman's hand, you all seem to be more worried about your hands bigger. Are you crushing, not making sure that you don't
Yeah.
squeeze a hand? And then we wear rings and we wear bracelets, and those things all get in the way. And so just how we do that connection together that feels as we're
Yeah.
equals.
Right.
And then even more uncomfortable is women shaking each other's hands. And when you do that, and women hug more.
Right.
And,
So is hugging a part of etiquette?
well,
There's a lot more hugging around nowadays than there used to be.
right,
Yeah.
right,
At least
So
in my
that's pretty
experience.
interesting.
right. And having started my lending career in the early 80s,
Yeah.
women didn't own businesses at that time.
Wow.
I didn't bank women business owners.
Just
I've banked men
men, yeah.
for 40 years. And that relationship has evolved into, they're not going to shake my hand. They're going to side hug me when they see me, because we've been through 40 years of
Right.
business together. But if they were with me and my chairman of the board walked in, they'd probably shake my hand in front of him.
Right.
So it's all those judgments of
Yeah.
when you should do certain things and when you could be more casual and when you need to be. But women don't really know how to shake each other's hands.
You know, that
It's really interesting.
one thing among men, and it doesn't happen that often, but you get the wet fish. I've actually had a reset with guys where you reach out and you're kind of grabbing the other guy's hands and you just get your fingers.
Yes.
Yep.
And I go, time out. We're going to do that again. I'll bring it up. We're not leaving it at that.
It's exactly what I do,
Really?
which I could get away with it. You're
Yeah.
you're doing
Well, I
it,
mean,
but-
I'll
but I get away with
say
it
it.
and act
Just
like
be,
it's
I mean,
my
it
fault.
becomes a joke, but I said, no.
Yeah. One
But-
time I was riding in the car with about 6 women to a meeting,
Yeah.
and someone brought up a man's name and said, "Has anyone ever shake this person's hand?" And almost all the women in the car said, "Oh my gosh, yes, they do the fingertip handshake." So your handshake is really your trademark.
It's kind of like a calling
It
card.
tells
Ooh.
everything about your personality. So if it can show that you're condescending
Yeah. If you put
in a
your
way.
hand over.
If you do the fatherly handshake,
Oh, to a woman, you mean?
yes.
Okay.
Or if you do the one where you
2 hands.
grasp over, yes, 2 hands, those are condescending. And so that's why it needs to come directly.
Yeah.
And I know men have had other men shake their hands and push their hand down
Yep.
or push it up.
Yep.
Straight up.
I've watched all this and just how interesting it is to know what all that means.
Yeah.
So
There's a funny video of Trump meeting all these world leaders at the whatever summit, and he literally, like, when he pulls people in, like, every time, and they, like, fall over almost visibly. But then there's, like, one world leader, I guess, who saw everything happening, and Trump tries to pull him, and he stays there, and you just see them both kind of, like,
Tug of
tugging
war.
back and
There you
forth.
go.
It's really funny.
International conflict.
Yeah.
he
And
was
the
also
thing-
known for shaking and then grabbing
The elbow.
Right.
too.
Yeah.
So
This phrase this as a question, but even if you're not aware of the rules, you haven't read them and nobody's told them to you, it's still quite likely that you recognize.
oh,
I mean,
sure.
that's one of the things.
Sure.
Correct?
Oh, observation.
I mean,
Sure.
I don't know what creeped me out about that guy, but something did. And it might be the way he shook your hand, and probably some other things to be fully creeped out. But so people are aware of it. That's one of the things when I'm talking to my clients about etiquette, because etiquette's become a subject now because of you. It's that people recognize it for whatever reason. They recognize it when somebody's well behaved, polite. Like I loved your thing about stands up, good posture. People recognize and respond to that, even if they reject the idea intellectually of etiquette, which I can imagine. They still respond to it. So if our listeners take time to learn this sort of thing, you're giving yourself an advantage.
Yeah.
Even if it's a secret, I mean, you don't know why. It's an advantage anyway. It makes you the smart player.
I definitely believe that. And if you think about the last 43 years I've spent in my business, I've been through bank failures,
Yeah.
mergers, acquisitions, and somehow I've always kept my job. And I think because I knew how to behave, I have long-time customers, so that must mean that I'm doing something that makes them want to stay with me.
Right.
And it's probably not just the interest rate, but having that relationship be so long-lasting. I really believe that this has helped my career more than anything. And, some of the things that companies started doing a few years ago is they might say a law firm might have 3 candidates, and they've got to choose one, and one person has an A in law school and one with a B and one with a C. Why would they pick the C? They took all 3 of them to lunch and to dinner, and maybe with their spouses, and C may not have been as smart as A, but they're in sales.
Right.
And so I am convinced that this has really made a difference in my career. But I also grew up with a father in the military.
Yeah, that makes a
my
big
dad's
difference.
a retired general.
Oh, wow.
And my knife blade better have been pointing the inside of my plate when I was really young. So besides growing up that way and then going into banking where we're expected to know how to do these things and do them, this was all just a natural progression for me.
Tell us more about the knife blade, because I've never heard this.
Well, okay, the knife blade is the business side of your knife.
And this is the eating knife.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, so when
Yeah.
you're eating at
Butter
a meal,
knife, any knife. Any
Okay.
knife is the business side of your knife. And it should always be pointing inward.
So when it's laying on the table, the
Yes,
knife blade's
the
toward
knife
the plate.
blade. So even when you sit down,
It should
it's
be
pointed in.
Oh,
And when you're using a knife and a fork and you lay the knife down, the knife blade should be pointing in. And it goes back to medieval times when men had big dinners and lots of eating and drinking, and apparently if your knife blade was pointed outward, that was showing that you might possibly be giving dishonor to your fellow diners.
Oh, okay.
And that you could pick up the knife
and slash somebody.
Yes.
Yeah, interesting.
I learned that whatever etiquette I have, I learned at the end of a wooden spoon. My grandmother, I knew that about knives, and I was thinking, why do I know that? When elbows on the tables, bring your food to you, anyway, if I did it wrong, whack on the back of the head with a wooden spoon. I thought, well, that's not very consistent with the idea. But anyway, but I remember.
Well, and that's the thing, is that we remember a lot of these things because we've made a mistake. And one of my favorite stories is a friend of mine was the CEO at a major health center here. And he grew up in Arkansas, and a real small town, and he'd gone to college and was in a fraternity, and they had their formal dinner one night, and someone said, pass the salt. And he just passed the salt. And the house mom said, don't you know salt and pepper are married and should not be separated, and you have to pass them together, even if someone asks just for the salt.
Interesting. I had no idea.
And
You're a kind of a heathen.
I know.
We're working on it.
If you just look
Go
at
ahead,
me, you
sorry.
know that already.
that believe it or not, that rule is really one of the favorite of men, that the salt and pepper are married. And he said, Hilarie, you can tell this story to anybody you want. He said, because I was so embarrassed that now that I'm in my 60s, I still think about that. And so a lot of the things we learn is from mistake. But when I was growing up, my dad would say, do you know why I'm walking on the outside of the sidewalk? Do you know why? And so that's
know
what
why,
made me
Khalil?
learn.
So that he's hit first if the car goes
Well,
up or what?
when there
The
even
splash.
predates that a little bit. Tied the horses to the hitching post, and they would bite. So you put the man outside.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And if a car's
You know-
driving by and
Yeah.
splashes, it splashes on
Yeah.
him
So-
instead of you.
Two things. One, I think it's important. I think etiquette matters because it shows that you have empathy and that you have self-awareness, but you care about other people.
Consideration.
And that makes a big difference. But the question that I have is, if I don't know the rules, if I don't know the etiquette, what is the proper etiquette? What do I do? When I walk in, do I say, hey, I'm new to golf. I've never played this before. Hey, this is my first formal meal.
Question.
Is it just to get it out there and let people know that this is not intentional? It's more so I'm learning.
Well, it depends, I think, on who your audience is with what
Right.
you might want to announce, because people may not know that you don't know some of these things. And so you might not want to announce that you don't. But you can also look around at other people. You know, one of my favorite books
Follow the lead.
is Hillbilly Elegy. And
Hillbilly Elegy.
and this young man, it's probably one of the best books I've ever read, and it just came out a few years ago. Young man going to law school, paid his own way through everything, really grew up in Appalachian, really problem family. And he gets invited to this dinner along with these other candidates. And he had to leave the room and call his girlfriend and say, I don't know the difference in red wine and white wine. What do I order? And where does my knife and fork go?
Yeah.
And he didn't announce to anybody he didn't know. He
Figured
made the
it out.
lifeline call
Yeah.
on that.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
But, you know, a lot of this too is, so in my business, I've thought about your client who's going to be
Contractors.
listening,
Yeah.
about how we interact together, because I have been lending for home construction loans, for commercial construction, and they're my contact also.
Right.
And so my customer is building a new home, or my customer's building a shopping center, and they have to deal with me and I have to deal with them. And just how we communicate together. And, you know, one of the things that I'm sure both of us feel is we have the client in the middle, and we have to educate that client on what some of the terms mean that we both know. They may not know. They sure learn the words cost overruns really fast. And
So, using your vocabulary can be a part of etiquette?
oh, sure.
Oh, that's
I
fantastic.
think it's so important that how we explain things, because the builder and I know the words we use all the time. But a doctor building a house may not understand what a cost overrun is, and a change order, and those kinds of things. And so how we communicate is really important. And one of the things that I want to be sure I point out as one of my biggest pet peeves is the word super. We
or
used
soup.
to super is the new like. And if you start listening to I'm super excited, I'm super tired, everything is super. And I don't think that's very professional.
Okay. What's a
And
better word?
I wouldn't go say, I'm super excited to have your business. It's awesome. So I wouldn't say that in a business setting. And then the other thing that I'm hearing people communicate is they say, hey guys.
Yeah. I do
I'm
that.
not a guy. And I think people have
Yeah,
gotten
that's
so
a really
casual.
good one. That's a really good one, because even in writing, I say he, she, or, you know, I don't say they, because that's plural. And anyway, it's awkward, you know, if I'm addressing a group to say, to handle the gender difference in pronouns. But
I'm a super guy sometimes. I use
Oh, you're
really
awesome.
and very and awesome and wonderful.
Really and
Yeah.
very are fine.
Really and very
well,
fun.
you know, and they're
I'm
going
very
to
excited.
evolve. The point is, they're hackneyed words that are
Yeah.
kind of
Yes.
take the place of another one that is like that was pointed out a long time ago. I thought that's right. Is to be honest with you, Hilarie. Blah blah blah. So now we're being honest. You know
Yeah.
what people is, in my opinion, I'm super excited to work with you. What's wrong with I'm excited to work with you? let the power of the word that you spoke mean what it means.
Yeah.
Well, and it's just filler or cliches.
Right, filler, there you
I
go.
think that's
when you
the
hear
part
at
is
the
the
end
filler.
of the
Yeah,
day.
you're wasting
and
everybody's
those
time
things.
and
Right.
Yeah.
yeah, sounds.
So I want to keep going through some of these events or areas of etiquette and just some examples that you have or things that people don't know or whatever. We've talked about handshakes. We've talked a little bit about meals, but I know that there's a lot around meals that we haven't covered. What are some other meal etiquettes besides the knife facing inward rather than outward?
Probably the biggest thing I see
Yeah.
with men and women is using silverware to cut something.
Okay.
And our joke is sort of that men do a violin, let's say you're eating
okay.
a steak,
Like
and
it,
men
yeah.
do this violin cut, but women do more of a fan type thing where
Okay.
they don't hold their silverware properly. And I was teaching a class, and it was I think the Boys and Girls Club, and the young people were graduating from high school, and so we had this formal dinner for them. And I had to go around, I realized no one knew how to use silverware, and I had to go around and place the silverware properly in their hands and show them how to cut. And I kept asking myself, why? They've been dipping chicken nuggets
Exactly.
and eating a
Right.
hamburger
That's
Unwrapping a
and eating pizza,
Right.
and so they've
use their
gotten away
hands.
from that. And the thing that I found the most interesting during the pandemic, when none of us could go anywhere and we all had to cook dinner and our families had to eat together every night, that was the perfect opportunity for people to teach their kids how to set a table and go through the table manners. And I've had several people tell me that their families chose to do that
Yeah.
because people weren't eating together. So
Yeah.
we don't, and we're eating on the run. So families really didn't know, they didn't invest the time in this. Well, this was the perfect time to be able to do that, because not everybody really knows how to use
Yeah.
the silverware because we're
and
in such a hurry.
and it still matters. That's
Yeah.
the thing I keep wanting to say. It still matters. I'm keenly aware of in England. We have any English? Yeah, we do. Sorry, but in English they do this stab and grab deal, where the way we eat with a fork, which is hard to say on a podcast unless you watch it on YouTube. But English, I don't know if it's everybody in England, but what I observe of people I know, they cut it and then they kind of hold it like a dagger and forks upside down, they jam it in there and bring it like that. And
that's the proper etiquette?
that's what they do. I don't know.
Oh, wow.
And to me, I don't know what Prince Charles does because I've never seen him eat, but I noticed that.
Sure.
And I can just hear people saying again, "Oh, come on, man!
Doesn't matter.
This doesn't really matter. If I do good work and I get done on time, that matters more than this." And perhaps,
Sure.
but when you're a competitive deal and you're refined, one thing that, and I think it's still, I could not stop. I couldn't stop it now. But when somebody comes to the table, I stand up.
Oh,
And it used to be just for ladies or people in superior positions or whatever. But it's just like, stand up,
Yeah.
And you smile at them and shake your hand right over everybody's food, which you're probably not supposed to do. But anyway, stand up.
But
No,
I couldn't
that's
not do that.
wonderful
I don't have to
because-
think about it. It just
Well,
happens.
well, because the rule really was and should still be that even if a woman comes to the table or leaves the table and comes back, we call it the dip.
Okay.
And at one of the banks I used to work for, all the men, this was our big joke, is they said, we know exactly how to do the dip, so you don't have to completely stand all the way up.
Okay.
You just
Okay.
acknowledge
I
You
thought
at
you
least
meant they curtsied
acknowledge
or
it
something.
by
So it basically
by
like use
somewhat
the
standing up.
use the handles of your chair almost and kind
Yes.
of lift
Just
up
lift
just
your
a little
weight.
bit and then come back down. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's such an easy thing to do. And I think it sets you apart because I don't see people doing that.
Yeah.
No, and you all said something earlier about whether or not holding doors for people. I really like that when a man holds a door for me or opens a car door. I like it.
Isn't there some etiquette around that in business that I've heard that you're not supposed to always hold the door for women, or is that wrong? What's the
I think you
in
just
business
have to
settings at
take
least?
your cues.
Yeah.
I think there are women that think that they should push through the door
Yeah,
and
like
they
it's
can open their own
condescending
door and all that.
of-
It's just a real independent feeling, but I still like that.
Yeah.
I opened the door for guys too.
Yeah,
There
think
was a
sometimes
book
the-
in the 80s, maybe the early 90s, called Dress for Success, which you probably are familiar with. Everybody knew about it. But the man who, nobody wears suits anymore, but the man who wrote that book was testing scientifically colors and cuts and haircuts and things like that. And I remember one of the experiments he did was in a hotel lobby in New York City. He had his test subject time arrival at the door with other people and counted how many stood back to let them through and how many
Push through ahead.
pushed through ahead of them. And it was one of his, that's the only one I really remember, but it was one of the major data points, empirical testing.
Really?
And I guess that really doesn't have to do with who opens the door, but if that protocol of who opens the door or who doesn't open the door is noticed.
Yeah.
it's just
It's
all
noticed.
courtesy.
Well,
Yeah.
but I think I think just speaking from my generation, some of the blurry lines with this are maybe like I'm married, for example, and if let's say I've got an employee that we are going out to a business meeting and I open the car door for them, although that is respectful, I don't want to blur the lines of because in our generation, that's not how it works. Most people don't open the door for the opposite sex. And if I start doing that, am I giving off different vibes, different intentions by being that courteous? Oh, wow, he's getting the door for me? What is he?
Ooh, that's a good.
I don't know. That's just how I know. It may
I
seem
see
crazy.
exactly your point on
I think
that.
it may seem crazy to some people, but I just see that from our generation is man, maybe this girl hasn't had the door open for her since her dad was taking her to school or something like that, And so that's where the lines get blurred for our generation, I think.
I don't think you can really do anything wrong
Okay.
like that. And
By
especially
being
if someone
deferential, I mean, being
knows your intentions. And so, in fact, this happened to me the other day. I was getting in my boss's car to go somewhere. I'd never been in his car before.
Mm-hmm.
And when we walked up to the car, his door was first. I mean, my door was first. And so he just walked over and did that. And
Good. And I
but
mean, I
didn't
agree
wait
with
in
it.
the car when we arrived. I didn't
For-
wait in
didn't
the
wait
car
for
for
him to
him
open
to
the
come
door.
around and
Right.
open it.
Yeah.
But
A lot
it
of
was
signals
just,
going on there.
right.
Yeah. I
Right.
mean, it's good. It's just it's something that's on my mind whenever that's going on. And
One, kind of bringing this, one, I've got a question about spacing. Okay, we got the 6-foot deal, so that's
Yes.
fine. But are there rules? I mean, I know there are. I don't know if they're considered part of etiquette of how close you are talking to people, and you're giving us a knowing nod, like absolutely there are those rules.
There's a really good book called Presence, and it talks a lot about body language and all
Yeah.
that. And so I think it's 58% of your physical body language is telling someone something
yeah, absolutely.
more
But
than
your
your words
communications.
and your tone.
Right.
And it's really uncomfortable when people get
In your space.
in
In
your
your bubble.
space. Right. But there are people that do it, and
Well, if you're, that's one thing people kind of need to be aware of. Most people know it, I think, intuitively or for whatever reason, but when somebody doesn't,
It's obvious.
it's real like, hey, this is weird, very uncomfortable. This is weird, guys.
Yeah.
And going back to hugging, especially when I'm known with maybe women clients or whatever, I just have to tell you, I am really self-conscious hugging a woman.
well,
that may
it
be
just
weird,
really
and I
depends
don't.
on how well you.
Yeah, I think it's the
Well, I
nature of
mean-
the
Know
relationship.
them.
That's true, but I'm kind of uncomfortable with it. I don't know why.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like, oh, am I?
Well,
I don't
there's
know.
a difference in a side hug
Right.
and a full
Yeah.
front hug.
Yeah.
That's really different.
Absolutely. So we talked a little bit about meals, but I think there's some other things that happen. I'm trying to think of what does a contractor actually go through where there is etiquette that they may miss out on. And so I think there are sometimes meals, probably less frequently than coffee or drinks or something like that. And there's obviously etiquette around maybe how you drink and, the timing of all that stuff. We can talk about that. But even more so, what's the etiquette around me buying your meal, buying your coffee, those situations?
Well, if the person that invites is the person that expects to pay.
Okay.
And this all happened, I'll never forget this, in the 80s on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. It was, you can't buy your banker's lunch. And so for years, because that was considered maybe a bribe or something. So
Wow.
I have always been the one that pays. Now, because I bank almost all men, still,
That's a little bit awkward, isn't it?
They know, and they've gotten used to the fact that I pay, but they will always offer and say, let me get this. No, I invited you. This is what the bank expects me to do, and this is what.
So is that the proper etiquette you have to offer?
If you hadn't spent 40 years eating with me and me paying for it, then, you probably could stop offering by now. But I think until you really know how that works, and I think I've invited you and all that. So maybe the first or second time you do that.
Yeah.
But otherwise.
Is there a wrong time to pay for the meal? Because I've been in situations where I'm like, man, you can't pay for that. Like I'm the one who invited you, or like, this is me serving you in a way.
I think not fighting about it is
key.
Is probably important. And when someone says they want to do it, and I just think you let them. And one of the things you ask about what contractors might be doing with maybe going for coffee or for a drink. So let's say they're meeting with a potential client. Obviously the first impression part is important of posture and handshake and
Standing
what you've
up
got
when they come to
on
the
and
table.
clean clothes, and we all know that. But
Well,
Clean
maybe we
clothes.
don't all know that.
well, if you're meeting for the first time to try to win someone's business,
Well,
That's
no,
right.
I mean, we want to make that as part of the list. I have a client sitting in the chair you're sitting in last night at 6 o'clock telling me about a potential prospective hire. Came to the meeting. This would be billing, in a billing situation. That's what the hire was for. Wearing an old t-shirt, worn out tennis shoes, and old jeans. And I know that old jeans sometimes are very expensive jeans, but a dirty t-shirt. And he just said, she never had a chance.
yeah,
As soon as I saw her, it's over with.
Yeah.
Judgment's that poor.
Oh, well, we
so we
judge.
say everybody knows that, but we want to make sure that they do.
well,
Right.
you're judged 11 times in first 5 minutes.
Oh, I believe it.
And so much of our business has to be done around a meal table, whether it is just getting coffee
Yeah.
or going for a drink. And most of mine is around lunch or dinner. And so just how you present yourself is important, definitely in that first impression, because you may not get a second chance. And if 67% of the time the first impression that you give is right, then what happens if you're in the 30% that they were wrong about you and you didn't get to go the second time? And one of the things that was said to me at the office the other day is one of our real estate lenders has mostly home builders, and he said none of the home builders are building customs right now. They only want to build spec houses because they just are tired of dealing with people. And I'd be interested to know if that with your client base, if that's really the truth or not, because that's so much of what they have to do is deal with people. And
Well, and that's where you can get really good margins too. Is when
No,
I mean,
if you're
willing
really
to
asking that as a question, I do see people, because issues come up usually.
absolutely.
And people do get really tired of dealing with people, and there's no doubt about that. Now, for custom homes, I don't know any builders who wouldn't rather build one that was pre-sold and prepaid.
I know.
So
But I was
you got to be
surprised to hear
really
that.
tired of people not to do that.
Well,
Yeah,
because the
but-
market's changed so
Right,
much
right.
right now anyway. But back to, you may have, as a builder, you may have to go meet, if it's a doctor building a house, you may have to go to their house that night and meet with them
Right.
and walk around the house, or their current home, or meet with them at a restaurant. And I have seen a builder that was in my neighborhood. He's now since moved, but I don't know how many homes that he remodeled and made a lot of money. And I would see him at dinner with the people that he had totally remodeled their home, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so he was socially interacting with his clients also, that I believe became friends. And that's really what I've done in my career too, is my clients have become my friends, or they were my friends already and now they're
Your clients.
my clients. And
Yeah.
so they come to my house for dinner, I go to their house for dinner.
I love your point, because I'm thinking, before we even started, how does etiquette directly apply and is useful for contractors? And you really put it to bed and said it well when you said much of your business takes place around a table.
It does.
It does.
And
Absolutely.
yeah, I also think of people going to someone's house and knocking on the door, so I'm sure there's some etiquette involved in that, and stand back and the shaking hands comes in. But that idea that much of it does take place around the table
Yeah.
is really key.
Well, it's social, it's comfortable, it's fun.
Right.
It's more casual, you get to know the person
Yeah.
a lot better, but you also don't want to offend that person.
Yeah.
And when we were talking about my lunch yesterday with a client and a coworker, and I watched the coworker eat like he maybe hadn't had anything to eat for a week. And at the very end, when his plate is completely clean, he looks up and says, "Oh, I should have paced myself better." And so he looked like, to the three of us, that he was
course.
only there because he was starving.
Right.
And then that made things kind of uncomfortable, because the three of us, the clients and I, were still eating, and he just ate and then said, "Okay, now I'm going to talk to everyone."
Right.
Yeah.
And so much of this is a social interaction that you have to learn to eat and talk and
Yeah.
You
communicate.
said earlier, it stuck out at me, you said people are judging all the time, and nowadays we're not supposed to judge. I mean, never were from a Christian standpoint. But the fact is, we're judging all the time.
Well, and it's
All the
part of human nature. I mean, it's there to protect us. We're judging if we can trust someone, if this is a
Right.
safe environment.
Right.
Those types of things.
Right, because really, again, so much of this goes back to the rituals that we have now that are ancient.
Yeah.
All go back to trust.
Mm-hmm.
The
Absolutely.
handshake, the knife blade.
Well, and I want to talk about trust a little bit, because I know that a lot of contractors, they're working with their employees or subs that are a different race or culture than they are. Mainly Hispanic. The Hispanic community is very involved in construction, and I know a lot of our contractors work with that population. And I want to talk about etiquette that goes internationally, because you did that international certification. I know that there's a lot more than just the Hispanic community that is involved with etiquette. It goes internationally. I have some background internationally as well, and I'll share some examples. But what's important when you're going beyond borders with etiquette? How does international
How do you know what they
etiquette
do?
change everything?
It's almost like every country's different. In some places you shake hands, in some places you don't touch the queen.
I wasn't
you
gonna do
don't-
that
You
anyway.
bow,
Yeah.
you bow, and I think I saw Jill Biden get off the airplane on the news this morning, and going to Tokyo. What do you do there? They were not shaking hands. That's
They're
a bow.
bowing.
Right.
And so you need to understand how the other culture works, and especially in meetings.
Yeah.
And say in China, if you've given a business card to someone, or someone's given you a business card, you need to acknowledge it, and you cannot put it in your billfold. Immediately put it in your billfold and put your billfold in your pocket, or you won't get their business. That says something to them that they're not.
You're not interested.
Yes, and
Interesting.
then some meetings where you sit and where you place people, and some places have a business card on the table in order of where everyone is, and some don't want that at all. And it's really a different culture
Yeah.
everywhere. And we had an event here, and I think we maybe had it 2 or 3 times, but it was an international event. We had it downtown, and we had people from all different countries. And
Yeah.
so I had to study each country that was participating, and then train the volunteers for each one of those countries on what
You
their
said
protocol
you
was.
studied it. How do you do that?
Well,
I mean, I guess
there's
Google
a really
cultural.
big book that
Yeah.
says how to, I think it's shake, bow, and kiss or something. But
Right.
it's,
Yeah. That's so interesting. I'm thinking specific of the Hispanic community. I play in a soccer league. It's called Mexican League, but it's because it's modeled after the actual league there. So if it were modeled after the basketball team, there would be the Spurs and the Thunder. And so I play on Tigres. And something that sticks out to me, this happens in Morocco too. If you go to practice, you go to the game. If you're the first one there, you don't really shake anybody's hand because you're the first one there. The next person shakes that person's hand. The next person that shows up shakes the 2. When you're the 15th person, you go and you shake everybody's
all.
hand. It's part
That's
of what
how
it
they
is.
make you show up on time.
Exactly.
You don't want to be the last guy.
But the other thing is, if you actually go and shake someone's hand, and it's just a normal handshake, they're going to look at you funny. But what they want to do is they want to do a little slap and then a pound every single time. And that's just how it is. And even with the other team, when you shake hands at the end of the game, that's what you do. And I'm just thinking of, like, if a contractor, I'm sure some contractors probably know that, but if a contractor knew that and they showed up on the site, how much more rapport they would have and a relationship they'd have with the crew if they went to every single crew member and they didn't shake their hand, but they did the pound thing.
Right.
They would just have so much more respect from those guys.
Right.
And I think that's some of the stuff that goes a long way. It doesn't have to be in the formal setting, and I think that's the part of etiquette that we get wrong, is we think of etiquette as just at the table or at these fancy deep meals or whatever it is, but it's the little things too. Some things in Morocco. So my family's from Morocco, and some things that you notice there that I think are unique to probably that part of the world are when you eat meals, your main utensil is either your hands or bread. You're not the only utensils that you'll use are if you're eating spaghetti, which is usually chopped up and you eat with a spoon, or like soup. Other than that, it's your hands. And you actually also eat from the same dish as everybody at the table, which is a big difference. Now, if you're a foreigner, they may give you your own plate and some utensils because they know you're going to struggle. But it's really interesting. There'll be a circular dish, and you're almost always sitting at a circular table. There's not many tables there that are going to be rectangular or square. And seating is very important in a room as well. The head of the house is going to sit at the short end of like a rectangular room at the very end, and then on the sides will be everybody else, and on the right hand side will be the next member of the household, like the first son, for example, would be on the right hand
That's
side.
who's going to
Yes.
inherit. Where
Exactly.
do you sit?
As the guest, you sit either directly across or to the left of the host, and so, usually they will have you directly, if you're a very respected guest, immediately on the left.
No, I meant when you go home and see your dad, where do you sit?
Oh, well, my dad's not about etiquette that much, but if my grandfather,
Well, maybe he
my
is, and you're
grandfather,
just not aware.
my grandfather was very big on this, and so if I was if I was the first one in town and it's a smaller gathering of like 4 people, I'm gonna sit on his left, or sometimes you may even have me sit on his right, if depending on who's in the room. But a lot of times, if it's a bigger gathering and I'm younger, no, I'm sitting
You go in
across.
the kitchen at the kids' table?
That's actually a thing.
That's our protocol.
No,
Thanksgiving.
that's a big thing too. But what's interesting is you have this circular dish in the middle, and let's just say it's couscous, which is a grain that you're going to eat with your hands. You have these imaginary lines, almost like pizza slices. Mm-hmm. And so if there's 4 people, it's going to be 4 quadrants, and that quadrant is mine. I don't reach into another quadrant. Oh, I like that piece of meat or that vegetable in that other quadrant. No, I stay in my quadrant. If it's 8 people at a table, you've got an eighth is your slice, and it's just an imaginary rule. But what ends up happening is, if you're the guest, there's a good story about my mom, actually. The first time she went and visited my father's family in Morocco, my grandfather could see that she wanted a piece of meat that was on the other side. And as the head of the household, he rotated the entire dish so that to put it in front of her. In the middle of the meal, stopped everybody from eating, didn't say a word, but just moved the dish so that she could have that piece of meat that was on that side of the table, or of the dish. And so those are just some interesting things that are there. Another thing, with bread is a huge part of the culture there. And when you eat other meals, you're dipping bread and tearing meat off and grabbing it with the bread with your hands. And you don't want to eat your bread too fast. It's not about how fast you eat the actual portion that's in front of you, but it's about how you're tearing your bread. And you always want to make sure that everybody has a piece of bread before you go on to your next piece of bread that you grab. So that's interesting. With soup, it's actually encouraged to slurp. It means that you actually like it, that it's good. And so whenever people are eating soup, which is a big thing in the winter there, you're going to hear a lot of just constantly. And I think that's even an Asian culture. I could be wrong on this, but
that wouldn't have worked with my grandmother's. That would be spoon worthy.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. It's all so interesting.
The last night of my international protocol school, we went to a Moroccan restaurant in Washington.
Excellent.
So we had to do exactly what you're talking about. And I'm glad you brought up bread, because this disappoints men more than women, because we all try to not eat bread, eat carbs. But and this goes back to medieval times too. So they had the tables set up so that maybe the most important people were up here, and then on the next level, the next group. And so it descended this way. Well, they didn't have a roll. They had huge loaves of bread. Uh-huh. And it started at the top, and you tore off a piece and put it on your plate.
Yep.
And it went all the way down.
Yep.
Well, how you remember this rule is you tear off a piece of your bread, butter it, put it in your mouth. You don't bite into it. And you've heard we break bread. But how you also remember is you think about the loaf going from table down to the next table.
So that means you don't take too much.
You wouldn't have bit into it
right
to get yours. You would tear it off. So that's how you remember. So when you have those beautiful cloverleaf rolls that split into 3, you don't open it all up and butter it
and then bite it.
Take bites and put back on the plate.
Gotcha. Interesting. Yeah, I didn't know that. I probably was the guy
and we don't
biting the roll.
slurp soup, but we do have the little boat that goes out to sea and then comes back to me, and that you don't tip everything toward you in case you would spill it. But it is so interesting to learn about all the other cultures and what you would take as a gift to someone's house, and in what color paper it should be wrapped, and whether or not you
got to worry about what color.
Oh, yes. And whether you're sitting in a meeting and showing the bottom of your shoe. And so, and one thing too, you also said that was important that I like for men to know is, so the seat of honor is to your right.
Yeah.
And Laura Bush was here for a civic event and they called me and said, would you design the table and
Oh, wow.
and put all the name tags and who sits where. And so I had to have the host here that were looking at the podium, and then she was to the seat of honor to the right. And how this works, and you should always enter your chair on the right. So let's say you're at a dinner and with your wife or spouse, and you want to do this the right way, is your chair's pulled out, you're standing here, you pull your spouse's chair out, she enters from the right, you push it in, and then you simply just get in on the right.
Gotcha.
So when you think you're at a big event and people don't know that, what if this person's trying to get in on the left and this one, and you're bumping into each other? And so there's sort of an order of how that goes. So the seat of honor should always be to the right.
I know there's, from my grandmother again, probably won't come up much in contractor, but put and pour, take and serve. I think put and pour from the right side, so you're placing the meal and filling a glass, I guess, and take and anyway, I don't remember because I don't do it much, but they come in from the right, it goes out on the left.
It's taken from your right.
Right.
One of the things that I say in my class is right is right. There are only two things that happen on the left.
Ooh.
What are they?
So if you ever have to ask yourself what that is, so think about your name tags on the right.
Okay.
You shake with your right hand. You enter from the right. And one thing that happens on the left is that's where a pocket square would go. That's where my bank pen would go. Any kind of decorative item
is on the left.
Goes over here. So think about military. All of their pins and everything go
on the left
over here. So the only other thing that happens to the left is if you're at a table and say the bread is in front of you, you take it and you offer to the left, you hold it, you offer to the left, that person takes one if they want it, then you can have one, then it goes to the right. Those are the only two things that happen on the left. So you can always say to yourself.
So that's kind of like a fake. You fake left and then go right.
Yes. Definitely. Definitely. But even when you start a meal, you look to the right and it is a map. How the silverware is set up is a map, and it will tell you, if I look to the right, I know how I'm supposed to start my meal.
So from the outside in, using utensils, the little fork, the middle fork.
Yes, and I love the BMW way that we say, here's my bread, here's my meal, here's my water. So when you sit down
from left to right,
in a bit and someone grabs your bread because they don't really know, or drinks your water, if you're at a small table, which happened to me yesterday, bread was here, two waters were here, and it got confused with.
Yeah.
So yours is on the right.
Everything happens on the right except decorative things here, and you offer food to the left, and then you can take it and pass it to the right.
We've talked about a lot of really interesting things. And maybe people are going, wow, I didn't write all this down. You said earlier, if you knew 10 things, you could really, I don't want to put you on the spot to name 10 things, but are there some number of things that we can leave people with? Listen, all this we talked about, but be aware of this, and this, so they can kind of checklist to get started.
Well, I'd say the most important things, that if you would just do these few things, you could virtually get away with anything. And it's definitely know how to shake hands and have eye contact. I was at a funeral this week, and the grandson was talking about the grandfather that had just died, and he said he taught us all how to shake hands and look someone in the eye. That's so important.
Yeah.
So I think if you really know how to shake hands and you've got the good posture and the eye contact, that's important. I think you should probably know how to introduce someone, and that's where protocol comes in, and it's the higher ranking person's name is said first. So in my company, my CEO is the highest ranking person I'm introducing to my assistant. But if I have a client there, my client is higher ranking over my CEO.
Okay.
So I think you need to know how to introduce people. Then when I think you should really know that your name tag goes on the right, and it does because you shake hands with the right and people can see that here, because I see that so often on the wrong side. And then you enter your chair from the right. I think, Martin, you said about taking the food to you and how you have posture when you're eating, I think is really important. There are a couple of napkin rules that are important, and you really want to open your napkin and use the inside of it and then close it back up.
Wow.
Especially if you're eating barbecue and ketchup and all that, which I like, and you don't want to see that.
Yeah.
But I think you need to know how to cut meat. It's really important. You're using your index fingers. Mm-hmm. You lay the knife down with the
blade inside.
The blade pointed in, whether that's a bread plate or your dinner plate. And then really pace yourself when you're with other people. And then when you're finished, put your silverware at 4 o'clock on your plate.
Together.
And I think, yes. And I just
so
think
that's
if you
kind
knew
of
those
shaking
things,
hands,
nobody would know.
Introducing somebody, and then really table manners, because so much business takes place around table manners.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also the pandemic we had to look for new ways to connect with clients, customers, and I found ways to I wrote notes, handwritten notes. That is so important. A handwritten thank you note means anything. And if I had just built someone's home, I would do that. Yeah. And because obviously we all want referrals. We want someone to say, oh, who built your house? It's beautiful and you should use him. And so I think finding ways to connect like that are really important, and that means a lot to people that you've gone sort of an extra mile to tell them thank you or how important they are to you, or how much you enjoyed helping them. I see realtors take a bottle of champagne or something to a closing and to thank people. Builders could do that too, or a dinner gift certificate or something. But
those are all great. Well, I think that if anything, there's a lot of practical things that we've talked about that contractors can take, but if anything they can take away from this, I think it's that they should be intentional with how they act around employees, around clients, around other subs or contractors that they are around, and just be very self-aware and have a consideration for them in the big things and the little things. So I really like this. I think etiquette's important. Yeah. Obviously, you can tell by the way I'm dressed that I believe etiquette's important. How can people connect with you, Hilarie?
Well, I have a website, HilarieBlaney.com. And
will you spell it? Because
I was going to say, I have a
no?
weird spelling, Hilarie, and then Blaney.
We'll have that in the show notes.
No I is in there. But I have a website and email, and I'd love people to ask questions and ask for advice.
There were a couple of courses on there. There were more than that, but Outclass the competition, managing your image and minding your manners. And then you have handshake boot camp. And then there was one in there that was international, which I dismissed right away, but I thought, why did I do that?
Yeah.
I have Canadian clients.
Yeah.
So anyway, and I think maybe you have some others on there. I'm not sure if that was it or.
Really what I do is, those were just guidelines from the Protocol School of Washington. But what I do is, and I don't really advertise. Everything I do is someone says, we need etiquette class, and they Google, or they say, well, we all know Hilarie. With that name, there aren't many Hilaries. So I just sit down with the customer and talk about what it is that they want and what they need, and and all that. And so I've done everything from, I don't know, Chesapeake executives to
Chesapeake Energy, some
Yes.
out-of-state listeners here.
And I had a nonprofit called New View, and everyone that worked there was blind. And I had to do a class for them. And so
Wow.
I don't have
Yeah.
any just cookie cutter classes at all. Everything
Gotcha.
I do is
Tailored to.
who
Designed
it
to
is
accomplish
and what do you think they need and how does this fit with what they do.
Excellent.
But the handshake boot camp is really, it doesn't take long, obviously, but I have named all these different types of handshakes that for some reason all start with an F, and you said fish,
Yeah.
and I said fingertip, and
Yeah.
so I've made a list of all the different kinds that I've gotten from people or that people have told me about.
I feel like the kids that I coach that are in high school probably need your handshake boot camp more than anyone, because it's all over the place.
Well, when men were growing up, your dad would pull you aside and say, "Son, I'm going to teach you how to shake
Yeah.
a man's hand." Not very many people said, "And you're going to have to work with a woman someday, and you need to know how to shake a woman's hand because it is a little different."
Yeah.
And so we just didn't really teach that. So it is such an awkward event with all of us, and again, especially women to women. We don't know if we should do it or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
Absolutely.
could have a whole etiquette course for men on what's appropriate with women.
Yeah.
Just that I'm bursting with respect for women. I harbor nothing but how is what I'm doing interpreted? And like you said, guys, I call women guys a lot, so I just stopped today. And
Just
my
stopped.
Yeah,
intent on
please,
that,
please.
well, I mean,
stop.
my intent on that is to be inclusive without using anyway, so I just stopped today. There you go.
There you go. Well,
So
Hilarie,
maybe I'll probably
thank you
slip
so
up.
much for being on. And
Thank you all.
yeah, we'll definitely link out to you, and hopefully people will get in touch. But thanks for sharing so much about etiquette and why it matters.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to The Cash Flow Contractor. Check out our website in the show notes or visit thecashflowcontractor.com.